When we look at ourselves, really look, we see something special. We build cities. We write symphonies. We launch rockets to other planets. We talk about abstract ideas like justice and beauty. We have art and science and complicated feelings, and then we look at other animals, even our closest relatives, the chimpanzees, and while they are amazing creatures, there's a gap. It's a big one. It's not just a little difference. It feels like a chasm. So, the biggest question in human evolution, the one that truly keeps scientists and thinkers up at night, is simple but profound. How did we get these incredible brains? And what does that sudden dramatic growth in our gray matter really tell us about what it means to be human? It's not just about size, though that's a huge part of it. It's about the abilities these bigger brains gave us. It's about how we went from being just another ape in the forest to the dominant species on the planet, shaping the world around us. This isn't just an academic puzzle, it's a question that goes to the heart of who we are, where we came from, and what our future might hold. It's the origin story of our minds, and frankly, we still don't know the full story. Think about it this way. About 6 to 7 million years ago, our ancestors were probably not too different from modern chimps. They had brains roughly the size of a grapefruit, maybe 300 to 400 cubic centimeters. They lived in Africa, moved mostly on four limbs, and had a fairly simple existence by our standards. Fast forward a few million years to roughly 2 million years ago, and we start to see some changes. Early hominins like Australopithecus had brains still in that chimp-like range, maybe a bit bigger, but not hugely so. They were walking upright, which was a big deal, but their minds weren't yet doing anything truly revolutionary. Then, things started to shift. With the emergence of the genus Homo, particularly Homo habilis around 2.4 million years ago, brain size crept up a bit, perhaps to 500 to 600 cubic centimeters. They started making simple stone tools, cracking open bones for marrow. This was a step, but it was Homo erectus appearing around 1.9 million years ago, where we see a real jump. Their brains could be up to 1,000 cubic centimeters, sometimes more. That's a huge increase in a relatively short period. And then with Homo heidelbergensis and eventually Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, brain size reached its peak, often exceeding 1,300 to 1,500 cubic centimeters. That's 3 to 4 times bigger than our chimp ancestors. That's a massive amount of extra brain tissue to grow and maintain. The real puzzle isn't just that it happened, but how and why it happened so rapidly in evolutionary terms. Evolution usually works slowly, incrementally. This brain expansion was like hitting fast forward. And it's not a cheap upgrade. Our brains, while only about 2% of our body weight, consume a staggering 20 to 25% of our total energy when we're at rest. For a chimp, it's about 8 to 10%. For a typical mammal, it's around 3 to 5%. Our brains are incredibly expensive to run, demanding a constant supply of calories and nutrients. So, for natural selection to favor such a costly organ, there must have been enormous benefits. Benefits that outweighed the high energy demand and the increased risks of childbirth due to a larger skull. What were those benefits? That's the multi-million-dollar question. Many theories try to explain this. And honestly, it's probably not just one thing. It's likely a complex web of interconnected factors, a kind of feedback loop where one change made another possible, and together they accelerated the process. One of the most compelling theories revolves around diet. Our ape ancestors were primarily vegetarians, eating fruit and leaves. That's a lot of chewing and a long gut to process all that fibrous plant material. But with Homo erectus, we start seeing clear evidence of meat eating. Hunting or scavenging animals provides a much denser, more nutrient-rich food source. Meat has protein and fat, essential for building and fueling a growing brain. Imagine the difference between grazing on leaves all day and getting a concentrated burst of calories from a fresh kill. That shift in diet could have provided the necessary energy budget for bigger brains. And it gets even more interesting when you add cooking to the mix. Richard Wrangham, a primatologist, has championed the cooking hypothesis. He argues that once our ancestors started controlling fire, perhaps around 1.5 to 1.8 million years ago with Homo erectus, everything changed. Cooking food makes it softer, easier to chew, and more digestible. It breaks down tough fibers and proteins, releasing more calories and nutrients that would otherwise pass through the gut unprocessed. Cooked food also kills pathogens, reducing the energy spent fighting illness. If you don't have to spend all day chewing tough raw food and you extract more energy from what you do eat, that frees up energy for other things, like growing and running a massive brain. It also shortens the gut. another expensive organ. There's a theory called the expensive tissue hypothesis, which suggests a trade off a smaller, less energy demanding gut allowed for a larger, more energy demanding brain. Cooking could be the key to that trade off, but diet isn't the whole story. Social complexity is another huge piece of the puzzle. As our ancestors lived in larger, more complex groups, they faced new challenges. You needed to remember who was who you could trust, who was dominant, who was allied with whom. You needed to track favors given and received, detect deception, and manage conflict. This kind of social intelligence, often called Machiavellian intelligence, demands a lot of brain power. The more people you interact with, the more intricate the social web becomes, and the more powerful your brain needs to be to navigate it. Robin Dunbar, an anthropologist, suggested there's a correlation between primate brain size and the size of their social groups. Our large brains might be, in part, a response to the need to keep track of a larger, more nuanced social world. And within that social world, cooperation and teaching became critical. If you're hunting large animals, you can't do it alone. You need to coordinate, communicate, and cooperate. This requires understanding others' intentions, planning together, and sharing the spoils. It also requires transmitting knowledge from one generation to the next. How do you make a good spear? Where do the animals migrate? What plants are safe to eat? This kind of learning and cultural transmission needs a sophisticated brain capable of imitation, understanding, and teaching. Which brings us to language. While we can't pinpoint exactly when complex language emerged, it's almost certainly deeply intertwined with brain expansion. Imagine trying to coordinate a hunt for a mastodon without being able to clearly communicate plans. Imagine trying to teach your children how to process a difficult plant or make a complex tool without words. Sign language allows for the sharing of vast amounts of information, the accumulation of knowledge over generations, and the ability to think abstractly about things not immediately present. It's hard to imagine our complex societies and technologies without language. Some theories suggest that the cognitive machinery for language might have developed as a way to manage social complexity or to plan and execute complex tool-making tasks, and then it got co-opted for communication. Speaking of tool use and technology, this is another powerful driver. The Oldowan tools, simple choppers and flakes, were a start. But by the time of Homo erectus, we see the Acheulean hand axe. These symmetrical, multi-purpose tools required more foresight, planning, and fine motor control to create. They weren't just picking up a rock, they were shaping it with a clear goal in mind. As tools became more complex, so did the cognitive demands, and better tools allowed access to more resources, which in turn could support bigger brains. It's a classic feedback loop. Bigger brains make better tools lead to better food fuels bigger brains, and on and on. The environment itself also played a role. Africa, during much of our evolutionary history, was not a stable place. Climate change brought periods of dramatic swings between wet and dry forests and grasslands. Our ancestors had to be adaptable, flexible, and problem solvers to survive these changes. A big, flexible brain would be a huge asset in figuring out new ways to find food, water, and shelter in constantly shifting landscapes. Those who could adapt, innovate, and learn quickly would have a better chance of survival, passing on their genes for bigger, more adaptable brains. So you have this incredibly complex interplay. A shift to a more meat-rich diet provides the energy. The control of fire and cooking further boosts energy efficiency. More complex tools allow better access to resources. Larger. More intricate social groups demand more social intelligence. The need to cooperate, teach, and learn drives cognitive development. And eventually, language emerges to bind all of this together, allowing for shared knowledge and abstract thought. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, gathering more snow and momentum as it goes. Each development reinforced the others, pushing our ancestors further down the path of cognitive expansion. But why is it still the biggest unanswered question? Because we can only infer so much. Our brains don't fossilize. We have skulls, which give us an idea of overall brain volume, but not its internal structure or organization. We can make endocast molds of the inside of the skull, which sometimes show hints of brain folds or blood vessel patterns, but they don't tell us how those brains worked or what thoughts they contained. Our evidence comes from indirect clues, stone tools, animal bones with cut marks, fire pits, the presence of pigments or ornaments, and the comparison of human and ape genomes. We piece together a story from fragments, like archaeologists trying to reconstruct a vase from a handful of shards. We have good theories, very strong ones, but no definitive smoking gun that says, aha, this is when language started, or this one thing made brains big. We don't know the exact order of events. Did bigger brains come first, leading to more complex social lives and tools, or did the pressure of complex social lives and the demands of toolmaking drive brain expansion? It's a classic chicken and egg problem. It's probably a bit of both, constantly influencing each other. And then there's the question of consciousness and abstract thought. It's one thing to have a big brain, but another to be able to think symbolically, to create art, to bury your dead with ritual, to ponder your own existence. While early signs of symbolic thought appear with Neanderthals' some burial practices, pigment use, it really explodes with Homo sapiens in the Upper Paleolithic around 40,000 to 10,000 years ago. Cave paintings, elaborate tools, musical instruments, figurines, a sudden burst of creativity and symbolism that seems to appear relatively late in our brain evolution story. Was this a final tweak to the brain, a threshold effect where a certain level of neural complexity allowed for these emergent properties? Or was it always there, just waiting for the right cultural or environmental conditions to manifest? We simply don't know what it felt like to be a Homo erectus or even a Neanderthal. What was their inner world like? Did they dream like us? Did they have a concept of the future or the past in the same way? The biggest challenge is that we are trying to reconstruct the evolution of something intangible: cognition, thought, consciousness, from tangible but incomplete remains. We're also trying to look at a process that spanned millions of years across multiple species in various parts of Africa, Asia, and Europe. There wasn't a single linear march towards modern humanity. There were many branches, many experiments, and many dead ends. Homo naledi, found in South Africa, for example, had a brain size more akin to Australopithecus, around 500 cubic centimeters, but lived much later, possibly as recently as 250,000 years ago. Yet, they seem to have practiced some form of ritual burial. This just adds more complexity and mystery. Brain size is clearly important, but it might not be the only thing that matters for complex behaviors. This question isn't just about ancient bones and tools, it's about understanding what makes us human. If we understand the forces that shaped our minds, we might better understand our potential and our limitations. It helps us understand why we are so good at cooperation and conflict, at innovation and destruction. It offers clues about the very nature of intelligence itself. The search continues. New fossil discoveries like the recent findings of Homo longi, the dragon man, or insights into the Denisovans from tiny bone fragments in ancient DNA constantly reshape our understanding. Genetic studies are starting to identify genes that might be involved in brain development and function, comparing them between humans and other primates. As archaeological techniques are becoming more sophisticated, allowing us to extract more information from ancient sites. But even with all this progress, the central mystery remains. The biggest unanswered question is about that spark, that sudden acceleration in brain development and cognitive capacity that set us on a completely different trajectory from every other creature on Earth. It's the question of our unique mind. It's an ongoing story, a detective novel stretching back millions of years, and we're still deep into the investigation, piecing together the clues, always eager for the next chapter. And that in itself is a very human thing to do, to wonder, to seek, to try and understand our place in the world, even if the full answer remains just out of reach.